Humiliation in public doesn't just sting. It carves itself into your memory with sharpness that never quite fades. It's different from private pain. It's exposure. It's the moment when your dignity is stripped away in front of a crowd, and instead of sympathy, you hear laughter. That kind of shame lives deep inside, replaying itself over and over like a cruel loop. It doesn't matter whether it lasted a few seconds or dragged on for minutes. What matters is how it made you feel. Small, voiceless, powerless. You walk away pretending it didn't affect you, acting like you're fine, but inside, something cracks. You feel your heart pounding for hours, your face burning long after everyone else has forgotten. But you don't forget. You can't forget. People think it's just a joke, that it was harmless fun. But what they don't realize is the weight that moment carries. The laughter echoes longer in your head than it ever does in the room. You question yourself. You start doubting your worth. Not because you're weak, but because someone chose to break your confidence in front of others. That kind of betrayal, especially when it comes from someone who knew your vulnerabilities, cuts in a way that apologies can't fix. You begin to replay the moment, wondering if you said something wrong, did something wrong, or maybe deserved it in some twisted way. The truth is you didn't. But humiliation has a way of convincing you otherwise. You try to move on. You bury it under work, under distraction, under forced smiles. But every time you're alone, it comes back. Every time you're about to speak up in a group or take a chance, that fear creeps in. The fear that someone might laugh again, that someone might see your weakness and drag it into the light. You lose pieces of yourself, your confidence, your spontaneity, your voice, and no one sees it. Because on the outside, you're just quiet or shy or serious. But inside, you're carrying a moment that changed the way you see the world. A moment where someone turned you into a punchline. What hurts even more is how others joined in. How people who never knew you laughed along. Not because they hated you, but because laughter is contagious and nobody wants to be the odd one out. So they chose to laugh too. And in doing so, they made your pain communal. They made it feel like the entire world was in on the joke. That's the power of public humiliation. It doesn't just isolate you. It unites others against you in a moment of cruel amusement. You're left standing in the ruins of your pride, and all they remember is how funny it was. But somewhere in that pain, something begins to change. You start noticing things. The way people use humor to mask their own insecurities. The way they target others to lift themselves up. You start to see through the fake smiles and forced laughter. And a seed is planted. A quiet realization that maybe you're not weak. Maybe you were never the problem. Maybe they were afraid of what you could become if you weren't broken. So they tried to break you first. That thought becomes fuel. It stays with you when you're rebuilding yourself. Slowly, silently. While they continue laughing, you begin working. While they forget what they did, you remember, not out of bitterness, but because that memory becomes the reason you push harder. You want to prove to yourself more than anyone else that they were wrong, that the person they humiliated is not the person you truly are. Because under that silence, there's strength. Under that pain, there's power. And behind that forced smile, there's fire. There comes a moment when the weight of silence becomes heavier than the fear of speaking out. It doesn't happen all at once. It builds slowly, layer by layer, like pressure in a volcano waiting to erupt. After humiliation, most people expect you to stay quiet. They expect you to accept the embarrassment, keep your head down, and move on like it never happened. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes silence is strategy. Sometimes it's the space where clarity is born. Because in that silence, while everyone else is laughing, mocking, or moving on, you're watching. You're listening. You're studying. People underestimate the quiet ones. They assume that if you don't react, you must be weak. They think silence means defeat, when in reality, it can be the first step towards something far more dangerous than an outburst: control, emotional control, mental clarity. You begin to gather your strength piece by piece. You replay what happened, but not to cry about it anymore. Now you're analyzing it. Every word, every smirk, every glance. You begin to understand not just what they did, but why. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what are they afraid of? Because the truth is, People who humiliate others are often trying to distract from their own flaws. They attack the ones who remind them of something they lack. And in that realization, you begin to regain your power. You stop reacting emotionally and start thinking strategically. What was once confusion turns into insight. You see how the crowd follows confidence, even if that confidence is built on cruelty. You see how quickly people abandon their morals just to be part of a joke. And you realize that the world doesn't reward the loudest voice. It rewards the most calculated one. So, you stop wasting energy on shouting back or trying to explain yourself. Instead, you begin to move differently. You choose your words carefully. You watch people's patterns. You focus on your goals, not to escape the pain, but to transform it into purpose. Every morning becomes a mission. Every setback becomes a lesson. You don't need to announce your comeback. You let your actions speak. While they continue playing games, you're building. While they're laughing, you're learning. It's in that turning point that everything changes, not because the world suddenly becomes fair, but because you stopped expecting it to be. You realize you don't need validation from the people who tried to break you. You don't need closure from the ones who wronged you. You need one thing, a reason. And that reason isn't about revenge, not yet. It's about reclaiming your identity. Because humiliation tries to define you by your worst moment. It tries to freeze time and keep you stuck there. But the turning point is when you decide you won't let one moment dictate your entire story. You decide that their version of you, the version they laughed at, is not the real you. So, you begin to show up for yourself. Quietly, consistently. Every time you resist the urge to lash out, you gain strength. Every time you stay focused instead of distracted, you grow sharper. And slowly, you become someone they didn't see coming. The best part is, they don't even realize it. They think you've disappeared into the background. They don't notice the shift in your eyes, the calm in your voice, the way you carry yourself differently. That's the beauty of a silent rebuild. It's invisible until it's undeniable. They'll still be telling the same tired jokes, still thinking they're untouchable, while you've already outgrown the space they try to trap you in. They taught you how cruel people can be, but they also taught you how strong you can become. And without even realizing it, they handed you your greatest weapon, clarity. Because once you reach that point, when silence becomes strategy and pain becomes preparation, nothing they say or do can control you anymore. You're no longer reacting. You're responding. You're no longer playing their game. You're playing your own. And that's the moment everything begins to shift in your favor. Revenge is a word that often carries a negative weight, as if it's only born from bitterness or hatred. But the truth is, revenge isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes it's quiet, cold, strategic. It doesn't always come with yelling or chaos. It comes with timing. The most powerful revenge isn't the one they see coming. It's the one that arrives after they've forgotten the harm they caused. When they think you've moved on, given up, disappeared. That's when it hits the hardest. Because revenge is best served when they least expect it. Not because you're trying to be cruel, but because that's when it teaches the deepest lesson. People who humiliate others often do it from a place of arrogance. They assume their actions will go unpunished, that you're too soft, too weak, too passive to ever push back. They laugh at your silence, mistake your patience for submission. But what they don't know is that you've been planning. Not to hurt them physically, not to become like them, but to dismantle their illusion of control. You take your time, not because you're afraid, but because you want the outcome to matter. You want the result to be permanent. That's the difference between emotional reaction and calculated revenge. One burns fast and fades. The other carves a scar they'll never forget. You wait. You build. You grow. Not to impress them, but to make yourself bulletproof. Every insult they threw, every laugh they had at your expense, it becomes fuel. They thought they were breaking you, but they were actually training you. Strength doesn't always come from support. It often comes from being pushed to the edge and learning how to climb back without a hand to hold. You take every piece of the past and turn it into a stepping stone. You sharpen your mind. You focus on your craft. You learn how to walk into a room with power they can't understand. And when the moment comes, when they finally look up and realize the person they once mocked now stands above them, that's when revenge unfolds. It doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it's as simple as success. You succeed in a way that makes their laughter seem pathetic. You succeed in a way that rewrites the story they try to define you by. Maybe it's a promotion they never thought you'd get. Maybe it's your name being respected in the very circles where they once ridiculed you. Maybe it's them needing you, needing your help, your favor, your approval, and realizing the power dynamic has flipped completely. They used to laugh at you. Now they can't even look you in the eye. The best revenge doesn't always destroy them. Sometimes it just erases their ability to affect you. It makes them irrelevant. It makes their opinion meaningless. That's when they feel the loss, because people who hurt others thrive on control, on knowing they can impact you. Take that away, and you've taken everything. When they see you standing tall, unbothered, unshaken, they begin to question themselves. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't have to. Your presence becomes the answer. Your growth becomes the response. And their laughter? It fades. It becomes a memory they wish they could erase. Because now, they're the ones looking over their shoulder, wondering if you remember, wondering if you still carry it, wondering if the next move you make will be the one that brings it all back. But you don't rush it. You understand that true revenge takes patience. It's about timing. It's about letting them fall into the illusion of safety, letting them think they got away with it. That's what makes it sting when they least expect it. When they think the world has moved on and you've forgotten, that's when the tables turn. It's not about cruelty, it's about closure. It's about letting them feel the same helplessness they once made you feel. Not because you enjoy their pain, but because you understand that sometimes pain is the only language they understand. Ask ChatGPT. There's something chillingly final about the moment when you decide you've had enough. When you stop replaying the humiliation in your mind, stop making excuses for their behavior, and stop hoping they'll realize the damage they've done. It's the moment you step out of the shadow they force you into and make a silent vow. Not just a rise, but to make sure they never get the satisfaction of laughing at you again. Not because you're vengeful by nature, but because dignity matters. Because you remember the way they laughed like it was a sport, like your pain was entertainment. That kind of laugh doesn't just fade, it leaves a mark. And you decide that mark will no longer define you. Instead, it will drive you. Making sure they never laugh again doesn't mean you want to hurt them physically or even publicly. It means you want to dismantle their illusion of superiority. You want to take away the very thing that gave them power over you. Their amusement, their dominance, their sense of control. Because the laugh wasn't just noise. It was proof they didn't take you seriously. It was their way of declaring that you were beneath them, insignificant, a joke. But you're not. You never were. And now, everything you do becomes a way of proving it. Not with words, but with results. You don't confront them directly. You don't chase after some dramatic moment of confrontation. That's not your style anymore. That would give them too much credit. Instead, you focus on yourself. You stop trying to please people who never cared about you and start investing in the only thing that truly matters, your growth. You begin transforming silently, behind closed doors, away from a noise. While they're still cracking jokes and feeding their ego, you're sharpening your skills. You're making moves they'll never see coming, because that's how real power works. It doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. They expect you to stay down. That's the script they wrote for you. They expect you to flinch every time you hear their name, to shrink a little whenever they walk into a room. But instead, you show up calm, composed, unshaken. You don't smile to please them, and you don't respond to their passive jabs. You let them talk. You let them perform. But you've already won the part they don't even understand, the internal battle. Because while they were laughing, you were healing. While they were mocking, you were learning how to stand without bending. And now, every breath you take is a reminder that their words no longer hold weight. And eventually they notice. Maybe it's in the way people start to look at you differently. Maybe it's when you're the one making decisions they used to make. Maybe it's when your silence starts to intimidate them more than your words ever did. That's when the laughter stops. That's when they begin to realize they made a mistake. Not just by underestimating you, but by pushing you to a point where you found your true self. Because you didn't just recover. You evolved. You became someone they can no longer reach. And nothing is more terrifying to someone who thrives on power than losing their ability to affect you. What they don't know is that your entire journey, every sleepless night, every moment of self-doubt, every silent breakdown, was not just recovery, it was preparation. Preparation to face the world without fear. Preparation to walk into spaces where their opinion holds no weight. Preparation to build a version of yourself that doesn't just succeed, but does so with the kind of grace that makes their mockery look juvenile in comparison. You're no longer the person who stood there, stunned and humiliated. You're the person who turned that moment into motivation. The final blow doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be cruel. It just needs to be undeniable. It's when they look at you and realize they've lost the ability to define you. It's when they understand that their laughter no longer echoes in your mind, but instead rings hollow in their own, because the tables haven't just turned, they've been flipped. And now, the one who once laughed without mercy is forced to sit